Season 3 of Warzone is finally here, and with that obviously comes the huge map changes, new weapons, and a lot of nerfs to a lot of the super OP weapons, as well as a lot of other things. And one of those other things is actually DLSS, which is what I'm most excited for about the season, to be honest. For those who don't know what DLSS is it basically takes a lower resolution and upscales that image to the current resolution you're playing on. So for instance, I play on 1440p, so basically it's taking a 1080p image and upscaling it to 1440p, which results in higher frame rates without really sacrificing too much quality. Unfortunately, this setting is only available to people who have an RTX card or higher, so if you don't have an RTX card or higher, you can't use this setting, which really sucks, because those are the people that could benefit the most from this. But we're going to be testing all the DLSS settings at 1440p and 1080p today and comparing them to each other, as well as comparing them to having DLSS off, and we're just going to see how well they perform and how good it looks. So let's just get right into it. All right, so we're starting off with DLSS disabled and on 1440p. And it looks like we're getting about 95 frames on average, which is not really up to my standards for when I'm playing a shooter game, which is the reason I normally play 1080p on a 1440p monitor, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. And if we go through to our settings and we go to DLSS, we're going to start by changing it to ultra performance. And it looks like we are getting a huge boost. This is about 60 to 65 more frames than we were getting with DLSS disabled. But with DLSS on ultra performance like this, the game looks extremely blurry, especially at long distances. So I don't really think it's a viable setting to play on actually in a game, because it just looks so bad. Although the improvement to frames is just insane. That's about 65 more frames than I was getting with DLSS disabled, which is just insane. Now, if we go back to the DLSS settings, we're going to change it from ultra performance to performance. We're going to apply that, and looks like we're getting about 140 to 145-ish, right in between there. So that's still about a 50 frame improvement compared to when we were playing with DLSS disabled, which is still an incredible improvement. But the game still does look kind of blurry on this setting, especially at long distances again, although it's not nearly as blurry as it was on the ultra performance setting. So that's good, but still not a setting I don't think I could really recommend using, although that improvement to the frames is just insane. Back into the settings, we are going to change DLSS actually to balanced now, which hopefully will look a little better than these other settings. And it does look a little better. It looks a lot less blurry at the longer ranges, but it still does look a little bit blurry. Doesn't look quite as good as it would look with DLSS off, but I mean, the improvement to the frames is still insane. We're getting 40 more frames than we were with DLSS disabled. Looks like we're hovering around 135 to 137, which is still just insane. It's obviously a huge improvement, but let's see what quality looks like. Let's change that to quality, and let's see, we are getting about 127, so anywhere between 125 to 127 it looks like. Mostly 127, 126, which is still a 30 frame improvement compared to DLSS off, and honestly it looks pretty much the same as it would with DLSS off. It is a very negligible difference. I can see a tiny bit of blur in the distance, but not near. Oh god, there's a guy. Nice. But yeah, the game looks basically the same as it does with DLSS off. Like, there's basically no difference, and I think if you're playing 1440p, you need to put DLSS on and put the quality setting on, because the game looks, like I said, pretty much the same, and it looks incredible. I'm gonna do one little test here. I'm gonna put DLSS off, and I'm gonna see the actual difference here again. So if I'm putting DLSS off, it literally looks like the same game. It literally looks like no different, and we're getting a lot less frames. We're getting 95 frames now with it off. So the improvement in frame rate is just insane, and the game looks literally the same. So if you're playing 1440p, I would put the quality DLSS option on if you have the option to do so. But I'm really curious to see how everything looks on 1080p, because I've heard DLSS is not all that great when you're using 1080p. All right, so now that we're on 1080p, we have DLSS disabled and we're getting about 129, 128 frames here, going up to 130 a little bit. So we're getting just a few more frames than I would at 1440p with DLSS enabled at the quality option, which is just crazy because I was playing at 1080p before on this monitor because my frame rate was just too low when I was playing at 1440p. So now I'm getting the best of both worlds. I'm able to play at a high frame rate and play at a higher resolution, which is just amazing to me. But let's just go through and let's enable DLSS and see what we're working with here. So if we put DLSS to the ultra performance option and apply that, the game looks really bad. It actually looks really bad, but we are getting a decent improvement to frames. It looks like we're getting about 30 more frames. We're getting between like 157 and 159, it looks like, which is about 30 more frames than we were getting with DLSS off. So if you're trying DLSS with 1080p, you're still going to get an improvement, but with this ultra performance, it looks like garbage, and I can't recommend using it, to be honest. But let's try some of the other settings. So let's go into DLSS and we're going to change it now to performance, and we are getting about 15 less frames than we were on ultra performance, and this actually looks a lot better. It still looks blurry, especially at long ranges, but it doesn't look nearly as bad as it was before, and I feel like it actually might be somewhat playable on this setting. But again, I don't think I could really recommend it because it's still pretty blurry at ranges, and it's going to be hard to spot people at long ranges with this, but still definitely a good increase to your frames. So let's go through and change it. We're going to go up to balance now, and it does look better, and we're losing out on what, about 5 to 10 frames compared to what we were getting on performance. So that's not too bad, but then again, we were getting about 125 to 128 FPS, I think it was, with DLSS off. So you're only gaining like 10 FPS by turning it on here, which is not worth it because it's making the game look a lot more fuzzier than it would with DLSS turned off. So I definitely don't think it's worth it, but let's see what the quality option gives us. Okay, so let's turn on quality and we're gonna see what this looks like. So we're getting literally the same frame rate as we would when we have DLSS disabled. So it's not really looking like it's worth it to use DLSS on 1080p unless you want to put it on like the performance mode. But then again, on the performance mode, the game doesn't really look good. It looks pretty fuzzy, to be honest, and the performance increase isn't really all that much compared to how big the performance increase was at 1440p. So if you're playing at 1080p, I don't think I could really recommend using DLSS unless you really want to get like 10 to 15 more frames. I just don't think it's worth it. If any of you guys out there are thinking, oh, I couldn't even see the difference between 1440p and 1080p on this video, that's because this video is recorded at 1080p, so you're not going to even be able to see a difference there. I upload at 1440p to give me a better encoder on YouTube, so we get better quality videos. That's the reason you see that. But yeah, I just don't think I could recommend you using DLSS if you're playing at 1080p. But if you're playing 1440p, 100% enable it if you can and put it at the quality option. I know a lot of people have been asking for an updated settings video, so we're going to be going through all the best settings for season 3 in tomorrow's video. So if you're new here, make sure you click that subscribe button and turn notifications on, and drop a like if you enjoyed this video. But we're going to cut to a little clip here. I'm going to have all the different FPS for all the different settings and resolutions up on the screen in this last part of the video, so you can really just compare them all for yourself a little better that way. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Here's the web. Peace.